This is Sullla once again. Welcome back to part 2 of this look at the trip that I took, Vacation 2013. I wasn't sure how people would feel about that first video that I did. As it turned out though, the reception was really positive. I wasn't sure if I was going to do more of them, but most people really liked it. And even when I was doing my normal videos, people were saying, when's the next travel video coming out? You know, we want to see more of the pictures from the trip. So here you go. Here's part 2. We'll go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to open up my photo album again here and note that I've been to quite a few other places. I have pictures from a number of different areas. If people really want, maybe at another point in time, in a month or two, we can go and look at some of these other trips to other areas if people really want to see more of where I've been. I think I'm reasonably well traveled. Been to a lot of different places, but this particular trip is Canada 2013, and what we're going to be looking at in this video is we're going to be looking at the trip through the French part of Canada. In other words, we're traveling through Quebec. So that's going to involve traveling through Montreal, Quebec, through the park at Saguenay, and also a couple short pictures of the evening I spent in Riviere du Loup. So, but in any case, these are all from the time I spent in Quebec. So it makes for a natural theme for this particular video. And we'll start out in Montreal. First though, before I even do that, I should pull up Google Maps once again and pick up from there. Now, when I finished the last one, I was in Ottawa. That's where I'd been. Starting in the Baltimore, Washington area, drove up to Niagara, then to Toronto, and from there to Ottawa. The next day I went to Montreal. And the drive from Ottawa to Montreal is not too bad. It was about 2 hours roughly. Yeah, it was right around 2 hours, and I didn't have traffic that was too bad. But that might be again because I believe I left between 6 and 6:30 in the morning. So I was in Montreal by like 9 a.m. Yeah, I was in Montreal by about 9 in the morning, so I didn't have such bad traffic. Montreal is, of course, a very interesting city. It's the second largest city in Canada. Toronto is the largest city by population in Canada. Montreal is actually located on an island, although it is a very big island in the St. Lawrence, so you wouldn't even know. See how it's actually on an island. And the downtown area for Montreal is in roughly this area right here. While I was in Montreal, I would be going through the old town, Vieux Montreal. I also went over to Ile Saint-Hélène, which is quite nice. There's a nice park there. And, of course, wanted to see Montreal, which is a famous park. But anyway, we'll get to those as we go along. So let's take a quick look, shall we? I'll go ahead and put this in slideshow mode. Okay, as it turned out, the place where I was staying was very close to the Bell Centre, which is where the Canadiens play. Montreal's by far most popular and famous sporting team. I was there in the summer, of course. If I had been there in the winter, I would have tried to see a game, although I know the tickets are outrageously expensive. So here is the Bell Centre, or the Centre Bell, is, I guess I should say more formally, where the hockey team plays, where the Canadiens play. And in the summer, there's not too much going on, a lot of construction. There was Disney on Ice is apparently coming to the Bell Centre in October, and they were already advertising that. But there's a couple posters for the team. You can see they're on the street signs. Anyway, not too much to see, too much going on in the summer as far as the Canadiens or Les Abs are concerned. Next up, this is just one a small park. I don't think it's a particularly famous park. I'm afraid I don't know the name of this, but here's another statue for Macdonald, Canada's first Prime Minister. And just a look at a park in sort of the early morning. Not too many people here. Woman reading, a couple families with kids walking around. But just to give you an idea, this statue here is a monument to the South African War, or the Boer War, which took place in the very beginning of the 20th century. I think people who are not from the Commonwealth are too familiar with this, but if you're from South Africa, of course you're very familiar with the South African War. But this is a monument to the Canadians who served in that conflict between 1899 and 1902. Most Americans probably not too terribly familiar with this, but it's a nice statue and so on. Okay, more significant here. This is the first real place of interest that I visited while I was in Montreal. This is one of the cathedrals, and as far as cities that I visited, out of the places I visited, Montreal had the most impressive churches out of the different places that I visited. And I actually went to a couple of them in the city. This one is Marie Reine du Monde, that's Mary Queen of the World Cathedral. It's a little bit away from the downtown, but it is very big. You can see here this picture of it from an angle. Very large cathedral. It's actually known as a basilica, which I believe is a designation only given to churches that are very large in the Catholic Church. And of course, it is also Catholic. As with pretty much everything else expect. So anyway, there's just a couple shots of the exterior and another picture of this statue here. As I said, this is away from downtown Montreal. I mean, it's in downtown Montreal, but it's away from the old town, so I don't think as many tourists go here. And it was pretty deserted when I was here. There were hardly anyone here, which is a shame because this is a beautiful church. Here's the interior, and I got a very good picture of this one. I've mentioned this before, but getting indoor lighting is always very tough to do. Pictures are always difficult to get the pictures right when they're inside, and I am not a professional photographer, but this one really worked quite nicely. Another thing I'll mention about this particular church is it's very similar in design to St. Peter's in Rome, if you've been there, and it consciously mimics the design. The green dome and the interior, in fact, looks a lot like St. Peter's as well. This particular, I don't know quite what to call it, but this thing that's located right over the main altar is again very reminiscent of St. Peter's in Rome, if you've ever been there before. This is one of the side little chapels. This is actually behind a little like barred off entryway, and I do this a lot with the pictures. There's actually you can't go in here. It's actually barred off by like a great door, but this is taken through that, so you don't see that, and it appears to be where someone associated with the church is buried in this small tomb here. Anyway, just some more pictures of what the interior looks like. This is taken from the side of the main altar, and there you go. There's a picture of it up close. Again, there's something almost identical to this at St. Peter's in Rome, if you've ever been there. And this is a picture of the dome. If anyone reads Latin, you can translate that. I'm afraid I do not read Latin, so I don't know exactly what that means. Something, I see Petrum, so I'm assuming that's a reference either to Peter or to stone. This is just another little side thing that I thought was interesting. I took this mostly because the mosaic here on top, this is the symbol that Vatican City uses in Rome. The two keys are the keys to heaven and hell, which according to Christian tradition was given by Jesus to St. Peter, the keys that unlock the gates of heaven and hell. And you will see this same symbol on the flag of Vatican City if you ever go there. But here it was done in a mosaic. A lot of time and effort into doing this mosaic. And I can't even imagine fitting all those tiny little stones in. This is a small shrine. I believe it's devoted to Mary. This cathedral is named after Mary. And the candles are where people can light a candle and say a prayer. I didn't see anyone doing that, but elsewhere I've seen that. And then just another view of the main altar from right in front of it. Again, this cathedral was mostly deserted. There was hardly anyone there, but it was quite pretty. So if you are in Montreal, check out, what's the name of this again? Riviere du Loup. Go ahead and check that out if you're there. This is not particularly pretty. This is a picture of the central train station. I was just walking past it, so I took a picture. Not too much more to say here. This is a statue of Queen Victoria. You don't see quite as much of the Commonwealth stuff in Quebec as you do in other parts of Canada, but it is still there. And here's where you know that you're in the French part of Canada. When you see the Montreal metro station, done in the same fashion as the Paris metro station. This is the same, it's an old design. You don't see this at all the metro stations, but when you go to Paris, you will see this design on some of the metro stations. So again, it's the French part of Canada consciously mimicking back to Paris. All right, these next couple of pictures are from the old part of Montreal, Vieux Montreal. So here's a picture of the historical center, and keep it wheel. Someone has graffitied there on the little sign. This is one of the historic buildings. A lot of the old buildings look like this. They're made out of stonework. You can see that they're very aged. This building is from sometime in the 18th century. I believe it was a convent at one point for a group of sisters, a religious order of some kind. I am not 100% sure, but I believe that's what the sign said. Here's a monument to the founding of Montreal is what this is. It's just sort of this tall stone monument. And I went ahead and took a picture of the text up close. The date here, it's both in Roman numerals and in French, but it's May 18th, 1642 is what that says. And what it's commemorating is, if I've done the translation correctly, when I looked at this was not in English. They did not have a little sign in English translating this, but it's in memory of Maisonneuve, the founder of Montreal, and it's somewhere very close to this that they initially founded the city in 1642, and that's what this particular plaque is commemorating. Again, I'm sure some of you can read French and can do a better translation than I can, but it's a monument to the founding of the city. which is somewhere near where this monument was placed. This is a museum. I did not go in this museum. I'm not exactly sure what this was a museum for. I mostly took the picture because of the strange design of this building. I'm not exactly sure what they were going for, but it was unique enough to warrant a picture even though I didn't go inside. All right, these next couple of pictures are the streets of Old Montreal. It's just a fun place to walk around. You see the very old, very historic buildings, a lot of narrow streets, very reminiscent of a lot of places in Europe. It made me think a little bit of the old part of Stockholm when I was there a number of years ago. Gamla stan, I think it's called. Just the old, sort of very narrow, winding streets in the old downtown. So here's just another example of this. The streets are paved with brick and cobblestone. You can drive a car through here, but it's mostly pedestrian foot traffic on these streets. Here we're coming up on the other famous cathedral in Montreal, which is the Cathedral of Notre Dame, if I remember correctly. So that's just the view approaching that. And so here we are. This is the big cathedral, and it's very reminiscent of a lot of other Notre Dames. It's reminiscent of Notre Dame de Paris. If you go to Paris, it's very similar to that in the design. Not as big, of course, not as big as some of the other great Gothic cathedrals, but still very impressive in its own right. And this is basically the town center, or the historic town center of Montreal, right here in front of the cathedral. So here's the statue of Maisonneuve. Note that the date is 1642 yet again, and he's decked out in his 17th century finery right here. So this is the area where you see all the tourists, but I mean you still want to go here anyway, even if you're you often want to avoid the big tourist areas, but this is still worth seeing. So the statue, the fountain, the cathedral, it's a nice place to come, and of course there's vendors selling stuff on the sidelines and lots of parents with kids. It's a neat place to visit. They've got the carriage rides that you can pay for. I don't think I've ever ridden in one of these carriages before. They're always so expensive, but you can do that if you would want to do so. This is building. This is still on that same square. I believe that this is a bank, but I could be wrong. Could be wrong. That's my memory. I believe that's what this was. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at Notre Dame Basilica. So you can see a little information about this, that it was constructed in the early 19th century, it was completed in the 1840s, and it is done in the Neo-Gothic or Gothic Revival style. And it is indeed very much a Neo-Gothic design. This is a design that was very common in around the mid-19th century. It was inspired by the Romanticism movement in Europe, and well, you'll see this in a lot of other places if you travel quite a bit and you see buildings from that era. Here's the interior. It is very pretty. I have to say it is a bit ostentatious as well, but the attention to detail is fantastic on the interior. My favorite thing I think about this particular design is I like the use of the blues on the ceiling to make it reminiscent of being outside and being under the stars. We saw that in one of the Ottawa, much smaller churches as well, but here it's taken to sort of a bigger degree. This is another one of the little shrines here. I'm sure that this is to probably a saint of some kind, but I'll be darned if I know which one. Still with the candles, it's a nice sight. Again, there's lots of these little areas here where you can light a candle and say a prayer, and you're supposed to make a donation as well. That's what the little boxes here. You're supposed to donate money when you do so. Stations of the Cross are painted in these very large paintings on the side, much more elaborate than in most churches. Also, of course, the use of the stained glass as well. This is just one of those, I believe this is another one of the little side altars, not the main one. And unfortunately, the painting gets washed out through the use of the reflected lights, but you get an idea. Everything is highly decorated, highly ornamental. A lot of time and effort went into fixing up this particular cathedral. Here is a pulpit where someone can speak. Look at, again, how elaborate it is. You go up this sort of very fancy spiraling staircase and then you can stand here and address people in the main body of the church. And this is another little side area for prayer. Okay, up close, if you want to see what it looks like, there it is from the side, and then this is it from close up, from sort of directly in front. Again, it's just extremely decorated. I don't know what more to say other than that, but you get a good view of this, what it looks like up close. The picture is just a touch blurry, but it's pretty good, I would say. It's pretty good. And the attention to detail came out fairly well. But again, you can see extremely decorated is the best way I can describe it. Now, there is a separate small chapel in the back of this building, the Chapel Notre-Dame du Sacré-Cœur, so Our Lady of the Sacred Heart, translated into English. And this one is a completely different design. It's obviously much newer in terms of its design. Instead of being sort of focused on goldwork, trim, and blues for a sky pattern, instead it's all done in sort of a wood pattern. Now, this is not all made out of wood, but it's designed to sort of look like it was carved out of the woods. And there's this sort of naturalistic design here in the background. I don't know quite what this is supposed to be, but it looks pretty neat. I just impressed at how this sort of smaller chapel in the back has a totally different thematic style to it. So here's a couple more pictures of that. This is what the sides look like. There's a second floor where people can sit. I did not go, oh, you're not supposed to go up there, so I didn't get a picture looking down. But anyway, here is the altar up close. It's much more of sort of a modernistic design. And then this is looking back from the altar at the direction you go in. You both see the pipe organ in the back of the church. And then these staircases. These staircases are absolutely amazing in order to get up to the second floor. I mean, just look at this design. Whoever did this, the architect that did this, really impressed with that work. I just love the way that this spirals around like that. It looks so delicate, and it also looks, well, I'm searching for the right adjective here. It very much fits in with the design of the rest of the church, but it also looks, I guess elegant is the word I'm looking for. Very much in that style too. So I really like this small chapel in the back here, just because the design was, very original and not what you'd expect to see. Obviously this is new. I would expect this has been built in the last 20 years or so, but very different, traditional looking church that's been around since the 19th century. So again, there's more of the ceiling, and there's the main church's own pipe organ in the background. Oh, and this is the first time I've not avoided cropping out the tourists that are here. It's quite crowded, as you would expect for midsummer at the city's most famous tourist destination. This is a little separate small chapel, and this is actually screened off by glass. You can kind of see the light reflecting off it, but yeah, this is actually screened off by glass, and I'm taking this through the glass. So in order to take a picture like this, you need to turn off the flash. Anytime you're taking a picture through glass, you generally want to turn the flash off most of the time, and then you have to have the shutter speed has to be sort of very slow to take in the low amount of light, and you have to try to keep the camera very steady. That's where having a tripod would be nice, but don't have luxuries like that. Anyway, so that's enough for the cathedral, but I think the pictures were pretty good. It came out rather well in there. Now this is a picture of a souvenir shop, so all the crap that you can buy in the souvenir shops that are right next to Notre Dame Basilica. So you see all the t-shirts and the hats and all the various, well, knockoff stuff that you can pick up. I didn't want to buy any of this. I just wanted to show what this stuff looked like. From here, it's another part of the city, although not too far away. This is still in the old part of Montreal. This, I believe, is the City Hall building. Now, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I believe from looking at my map, that's what this was. It's certainly an imposing enough building, but I'm pretty sure this is the City Hall. Here's a little design in the flowers. Les Armoiries de la Ville de Montréal. I don't know this word, I'm afraid, so I can't quite translate that, but the rest of it is City of Montreal, of course. Here is another big tourist area. This is Rue Jacques Cartier. This is another big place where tourists come. It's an area that's, you can see, is blocked off to cars, so it's just for pedestrians, and it's a whole bunch of restaurants where people eat, and little vendors and small shops. Again, still in the historic part of town. You can see the small, narrow streets, not designed for cars. This is the Artist Road, or Rue des Artistes, where, it's small shops and artists selling their stuff and places to eat. And oh, look, there's even a Dairy Queen, apparently. Although I doubt people go to Montreal to eat at Dairy Queen. But hey, some people probably do. This is just another one of those streets. Again, no cars, all pedestrians, small shops, places to eat. The smoked meat looked pretty good, but I did not eat here. I had limited time to see things, as with all these cities. And just a nice place to walk around, soak up the ambiance, soak up the atmosphere. Now, the thing is, I came here with my family about 4 or 5 years ago. That was the first time I had visited Montreal, and we actually did eat and got lunch in this place, Jacques Cartier place. So I'd been here before, so I didn't want to spend too much time, but it's a neat place to walk around. And again, you can see that there's lots and lots of people in this area. This is another place that was marked on the maps as the place to go. This is the Marché Bon Secours, and in other words, it's sort of like I believe it was a marketplace originally, and it's been converted into shops and little boutiques now. It was not very impressive inside. I was actually underwhelmed when I went inside, so I did not take any more pictures. It was upscale boutique stores basically, like clothes and things like that, and I was not too interested in those things. This here is another church, although this one is much smaller. This is actually the oldest church in Montreal, this one right here. It's not nearly as big as the other two. Here's the look of it from sort of the front. Again, this is again in the old part of town. So you can see the name on this plaque. By the way, this is why I take pictures of the little plaques, because otherwise I realized when I first started going around, I would have these pictures and I'd be like, where in the world am I? I would look back at my pictures and I was like, I don't remember what this is. So that's why I take pictures of the plaques. This is Notre Dame de Bon Secours. This is the oldest church in Montreal, again, since 1655, although this exact building is not from 1655. This building's a little bit more recent. This was a church that is devoted to sailors, is what this was originally built for. It was built for sailors going up and down the St. Lawrence, and that's reflected in the fact that there are little boats hanging down from the ceiling on wires. It's a bit odd, but hey, willing to go with it. Again, this church is much smaller, but it has a bit of charm of its own. It's still very decorated. A lot of paintings. You can see paintings of various religious figures back there. And these pictures actually came out rather well, too. It's always a little bit difficult, as I've said before, when you're inside. So there's the light coming in the stained glass windows. Not huge or anything, but they have their own charm. And again, more of the little boats hanging down from the ceiling. This was not a crowded church either. There were not many people here. It seemed as though most people generally just went to the big Notre Dame Cathedral right in the city square. So here's another one of the little side altars in Notre Dame de Bon Secours. And that's the main altar right there. There's a painting. Again, since this is Notre Dame, Our Lady, it's a church devoted to Mary, which is very common of churches in France. And I would expect by extension churches in Quebec as well. Belief in Mary has always been extremely strong in France. That dates back to the medieval period. I'm not a medievalist, but I have read that in my research in the past. And anyway, there's a look back at the entrance, another one of the ships, and the much smaller pipe organ in this particular church. So very small, much more intimate, but older as well. This is, as I said, the oldest one in Montreal. So this building actually dates back to 1803. Yeah, there's been a church on this spot since 1650 whatever, but this church only dates back to like 1800. You can even see here, it's the second stone chapel erected 1771 over the foundations of the original stone chapel destroyed by fire in 1754. So this church does not date back to the 17th century, but it does date back to the 18th century, and that makes it older than the other two that I saw. Excuse me. Remember, 17th century is 1600s, 18th century is 1700s, 19th century is 1800s, and so on. Okay, we're going to a completely different part of Montreal now. In order to go out to the islands, I needed to take the subway, so that's what this is a picture of. This is me getting ready to board the Montreal subway at Montmorency. So I'm going to jump on the subway and then ride it. And so now we've skipped riding the subway and we're out on the two islands. They are both parks. Park Jean Drapeau, who was a politician, as I understand it. I believe he's a politician in former history of Montreal. So these pictures are from the two islands, Ile Sainte-Hélène and Ile Notre-Dame. The subway comes out, where is it? It's like right around here somewhere. It should be, I'm assuming it's marked on the map. There it is. Oh, there it is. It's the little down arrow. Yeah, so the subway comes out here. I walked around first Ile Sainte-Hélène, and then I walked over to Ile Notre-Dame. So you'll see pictures of both of them right here. I actually did a lot of walking on this day. I was getting pretty tired by the end of the day. First, though, here's a picture looking back at Montreal, looking back at the main part of the city from the water. That right there is the dome of, I believe, the Marché, the market that I didn't really take too many pictures of. There is the big Notre Dame Cathedral, the one right in the city square, and I think that is the right over here is the much smaller much smaller church that I was just in, the oldest one. So that's the old part of the city, and then there's all the high-rise buildings. And then the big hill in the background is Parc Montreal, where we'll be later on today. Okay, this is another picture looking across the river, and there's the Molson Brewery, if you're ever curious. One of the Molson breweries in any case. And I did not go in there because it's not really close to anything else in Montreal, but I'm sure they have a brewery tour. I have been on the Budweiser, Coors, and Miller brewery tours in the U.S. in the past. Out of them, the Coors tour I think is the best, if you're curious. This is a fort that used to be on the island, the Stuart Museum, and the fort itself was pretty underwhelming. I took this picture, but you had to pay to go inside, and honestly, it was not that impressive looking, so I chose not to go in here. But this is where there was a military barracks at one point in time. This is a park, as I mentioned. This is just one of the scenes from the park. I thought that this was just a nice view going through the park. Not too much more to say. Now, the most interesting thing on the island was the geodesic dome that was built for a Montreal World's Fair, and it's still there, so you can go check it out. Yeah, check out this thing. It looks like the big dome in Epcot in Disney World. Well, it should, because the one in Disney World was based, I believe, on the design that they did here in Montreal for the World's Fair. This one is older, and this one came first. This is the interior of the dome. You can pay money to go up into the dome. I didn't think that was really necessary. I thought I could get a plenty good view just from underneath it. So yep, there's the view looking up. I just thought that this thing was really wild looking. I believe that this was enclosed at one point in time. It's not anymore. There's a view of sort of the lattice structure up close. And there you go, looking back at the dome. I mean, you're just walking around from place to place, and you see this big dome peeking out over the trees. It's really wild. And that's, you can, as I said, you can pay to walk up the stairs or go up the elevator and check out whatever this is, but wasn't too interested in doing that. I thought I could see the dome just fine without paying $15 or whatever it was to go up. So, yep, there you go. But dome, never thought I'd see that. I had no idea that this was in Montreal. This is me crossing the bridge over to the other island, Ile Notre Dame. And the big attraction on Ile Notre Dame is there's a huge casino there. Yep, Montreal has a casino, and it's built on one of the islands. So this is a view from the back, and then this is a view from the front. It looks, I don't even know how to describe this building, like a spaceship or something. It doesn't look like a casino. I mean, I wouldn't see that and say, yep, that's a casino or anything like that. But it is, in fact, a casino, and there were all kinds of tour buses rolling up and dropping off people. Now, you're not allowed to take pictures on the inside of a casino. They specifically say no photography. Well, I mean, I go ahead and take pictures anyway. Just, you kind of have to hide from the staff. Now, the downside is because I'm trying to take this picture covertly, it doesn't come out very clean. It came out very blurry because they didn't have time to sort of set and get everything lined up correctly. Not too much to say. Standard casino, lots of slot machines. They did have a lot of table games here as well. A lot of people playing blackjack and people playing roulette and things like that. I personally do not like to gamble. I am too much of a mathematician. I have a minor in statistics from my undergrad days. I'm too much of a mathematician to like gambling, knowing that the odds set up at casinos so that you are always going to lose. I mean, the casino always wins over enough time. It just doesn't seem like a very intelligent way to spend your money. And granted, I realize it's not about intelligent investing, it's about having fun, but I'd rather do something else with my money. So I just walked around for 10 or 15 minutes and then got out of there. Yeah, I don't really like casinos very much. This is another random thing spotted in the park. It's a statue of a robot, I guess. I don't know what this is, but if I see something interesting, I take a picture of it. So from there, I got back on the subway, and I rode the subway to McGill, the subway station here. And what this shows is this is the Montreal Underground, the Montreal Subterranean, I guess you call. And Montreal, like Toronto, has a huge underground that connects all these different subway stations and all these buildings. You can really walk for all the way from up here at Uquam, or the Place des Arts metro station. You can walk all the way underground over here to the train station, to the Bell Center, or you can walk up to McGill University and just all through this stuff. So it's all connected underground, and that starts to make sense when you realize, hey, it gets very cold in the winter in Montreal. So here's just a couple of pictures of that. It's a huge underground complex, malls, shops, stores, places to eat, just all kinds of stuff, and floor after floor after floor. This particular area in the Eaton Center is one of the biggest parts of the underground, and this is 5 stories underground. So I'm trying to convey a sense of just how big this is. So like here's the ground level is like right around here, or ground level is like right around here, and then you go down 1 floor, 2 floors, 3 floors, 4 floors, 5 floors, down to the metro. So yeah, note that it's 100. What is it? 100 meters? I guess it's 100 meters to the metro. It's not 100 meters underground. That would be really far underground. But I'm just trying to get a sense of these pictures. It's like, yep, there's a whole lot of floors here, and it goes down a long, long way. The other highlight of this area, I mean, granted, you can do a lot of shopping here, but that's not really what I was here for, is the food court. This picture doesn't really convey it, but this is the biggest food court I believe I've ever seen in my life. There were about between 25 and 30 places to eat in this food court. Starting here, you can't really see, but it goes all the way back, like way back there, where the mouse cursor is pointing. That's still more food places, and it just goes all the way around. This here, the juice bar or whatever this is, that was a little sort of kiosk in the middle of this food court. So the food court actually goes around the outside and then loops around, and there were, as I've said, between 25 and 30 places to eat. You could get pretty much anything that you'd want here. All different styles, ranging from traditional American and Canadian food to French and Italian and Greek food and East Asian food and food from South Asia. If you want to get Indian food here, or if you want to get Korean food or Thai food or whatever you want. Every style you can imagine. So this is where I actually got lunch for the day, and it was pretty good. Pretty inexpensive and pretty good. One of the other neat things about that is McGill University, right very, very close to all that stuff that you just saw. So if you were a student at McGill, which is a very famous university in North America, if you went to McGill, you could, well, go and get food at the food court, or you could go and walk and buy stuff at this humongous underground shopping complex. So it's set up pretty nicely if you're a student at this particular area. So these next couple pictures are from McGill. Oh, and by the way, note the politics in here. Stop Harper's crimes. So somebody here is not a fan of Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper, which I guess is not to be unexpected on a university full of generally young and generally liberal students. Okay, so these pictures are from the university. I always seem to end up at universities and colleges of some kind. I guess I'm drawn there by what I do for a living. But here's the administration building. I didn't think this campus was quite as pretty as the University of Toronto. The buildings seem to be newer. They didn't seem to be as historic, but it was nice in its own right. It was very hilly as well. See, there's the administration building. Lots and lots of hills. Unfortunately, this picture was blurry. It didn't quite come out. I was trying to get this arch here, but this was by the medical portion of the campus. There were some of these buildings are hospitals or something like that, but I mean, I'm not going in all of them to find out. One of the other interesting things about McGill is apparently the Montreal Alouettes play there. I don't know if they play all their games there or some of their games, but they were getting ready and they actually played a game on this very day. I believe this was a Friday. I think that this was a Friday. It was either a Friday or a Saturday, and they were playing a game this evening. Though there was all the security staff getting set up at Percival Molson Stadium. I'm sure it was Percival Stadium initially, and then Molson was like, "Hey, we'll donate you a couple $1,000,000 if we can get our name on the stadium." But so anyway, the Alouettes were playing. Alouettes are a Canadian Football League team, CFL. So they had the field. They were getting the field ready. Again, this is not. I did not pay to go into this field. I am taking this picture through a grate of bars again. But they were getting all set for the Alouettes to play that evening. I don't know if they won the game. I guess I could check that. Oh, and by the way, check out the sponsorship. Canada's the most Canadian of all Canadian institutions, Tim Hortons, is also a sponsor. The remainder of these pictures are from Montreal. This is a very large park in Montreal. It's quite famous, very hilly. Montreal is, Royal Mountain or Royal Hill, however you want to translate that. So there are just miles and miles of trails. I guess you should say kilometers and kilometers of trails, since I'm in Canada, where you can walk all around to different parts of the park. I was already pretty tired because by this point, this is, I guess, about 4 to 5 p.m. when I'm here. By this point, I've already been up for almost 12 hours. I drove for 2 hours and then been walking for 8 to 10 hours at this point. So I'm starting to get pretty tired. I didn't want to walk around the full park, but I just wanted to see some parts of it. So what I did was walk through some of the trails and walked up to this overlook at, I don't know what this is quite called, but this is sort of the scenic overlook of the park. Again, the park is very hilly, so you look down on the rest of the city. Here is the chalet, is what this was called, Chalet du Montreal. Picture the exterior, and here's the name of it. I wanted to get a sign just saying the name of the building. I couldn't find one, so this is actually the evacuation plan, and the only way I could get the name of the building here. But it's just sort of a small building. It's like a community center, activity center. Here's the interior of the chalet right there. Pretty open, not too crowded. A couple people there, but just mostly a big empty space. There were things like restrooms and a little cafe. Here's the big plaza in front of it. So I mentioned that this is where you get the overlook. Montreal is, of course, a big hill. So from there, you can look down on the rest of the city, and you get these tremendous views looking down at the rest of Montreal. So great views. See all the buildings sort of arrayed down below you. This is, over here is where McGill University is, over in this area. Over here. You can't really see the historic part of the city, Vieux Montreal, because it's mostly blocked out by the high-rise office buildings. And then this is looking in the opposite direction. The historic part is off to the left. This is looking towards the south, I believe. I think so. I have to look back at the map to see, but this is looking in the opposite direction. And then just a zoomed in view looking at, well, the downtown part. So you get a great view from up there, and it's a fitting way to look back at the rest of the city. Definitely, if you have some time, if you're in Montreal for a couple days, do some walking, some hiking, check out the park. It is quite nice on a sunny day. Now this picture is from where I stayed. This is the Auberge de Jeunesse, in other words, the youth hostel in Montreal. Again, hostels are cheap, an inexpensive place to stay. The place where I stayed was sort of two rooms connected together. There was one room that had 4 people in it, and then there was a door, and that led into another room that only exited off that main room. And that room had another 4 people in it, and that was the room I was in. So it was quite nice. It was sort of back away from the main hall. And that group of 8, the 2 rooms of 4, it had its own bathroom. So that was quite nice. That's better than a lot of the other hostels I've been to. And this is down in the basement. This is what the basement looks like. So pool table, there's a little bar, TV. It wasn't really showing much of anything. Tables. The main thing I use this for is just so I can plug in my laptop, and I can use the internet, and I can recharge my phone and recharge my camera from taking pictures. But there's this perception that hostels are like really nasty and grungy, and yes, I have been to some that are like that, but a lot of them are very nice, and this one was, I would highly recommend. It was very inexpensive to stay here, and it was comfortable. It was very, very clean, very comfortable, and you just hang out with other people in the basement in the evening if you want to do that. They had pub crawls and things like that. Now I'm way too tired to do that by 8 or 9 p.m. I'm getting ready for bed because I've been up since 6. But yeah, lots of activities. So anyway, that's Montreal if you wanted to see what Montreal's like. And I think I was able to see most of what I wanted to see in the city. I would have liked to have spent more time walking around the park, but that's about it. So again, that's all one day. Now we bid farewell, or bid adieu, to Montreal. And from Montreal, it's up to Quebec City, which is where I went next. It's a little bit further. It's about 2.5 hours worth of driving from Montreal to Quebec City. So I think I left at about 6:30, and I got there. I actually had a little trouble finding a place to park my car, but I got to Quebec between 9 and 9:30 the next morning. And that's one thing I'm kind of glossing over in all of this, is the time that it takes to get from place to place, because a lot of things are not too close in Canada. Anyway, Quebec City, I should say, is one of the main things that I really wanted to see on this trip. It's one of the main reasons why I did this trip in the first place. I had already been to Montreal and Toronto in the past, but I'd never been to Quebec City. And for a historian like me, Quebec City holds a lot of appeal because it's not only a historic city, but a very famous battle was fought in Quebec during the 7 Years' War in 1759. It's in fact one of the most important battles in the history of North America, because the British victory in this battle was what ultimately was responsible for France losing their colonies in mainland North America. And so you can even see Parc des Champs de Bataille, that's Parks of the Field of Battle, was fought here on the Plains of Abraham. So anyway, Quebec is a very historic city, and I'll be referencing that a lot as I go through this. Quebec's also a walled city, by the way. It's completely encircled by a wall. Well, not the whole city, obviously, but the old historic part of it. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of this, shall we? Here is one of the signs welcoming you to Quebec, and you can see sort of an overview of what it looks like. So here is Old Quebec, Vieux Quebec, the old part of the town. It is encircled by a wall That's what this, well, black part of the map is. There's something called the Citadel down here in the southwest corner. Now, this was built in the early 1800s, so this was built by the British. But note that Quebec, the old historic part, is up on these cliffs. These are cliffs here on the map. It's very high. It's up on top of a hill, so that's why the location of the city was picked. It's very defensible. Over here is where the battlefield was, and this is, like I said, the old part of the city. This is the historic part, and then down here is the port. So I'll be walking around and going to all those different parts. Bienvenue, welcome, willkommen, German, bienvenuto. Ooh, I think that's actually Italian, not Spanish, I think. And then, what is this? Yokoso, and that's Japanese there. So you can see the signs. Anyway, here is another sign. So first thing I saw right where I parked my car, there's a big underground parking lot right next to this. This is l'Assemblée Nationale. In other words, it is the Parliament building for Quebec. Right here in the background. Quebec City is the capital of the province of Quebec, and this is the Parliament building behind this fountain. There you go, another one of these Parliament buildings. Now, I would have liked to have gone inside and taken the tour, but the tour only departed once an hour, and unfortunately, I was never here right when a tour was departing. I wasn't going to just wait around for a half hour, what have you. So I was not able to get a tour of the inside. I only saw the exterior of the building. That said, it is a nice exterior. Here's another sign. Yeah, see, it says L'Hôtel du Parlement, saying that it's the Parliament building right there. This is in Quebec. You don't see as much stuff translated as in other parts of Canada. They will just leave stuff untranslated from French. I think it's their way of getting back at the English parts of Canada. But let's see here. When was this built? Okay, it was built between 1877 and 1886. It's a sacred pantheon of the heroes of French America and the grand figures of the British regime. And then it talks about the architect down here and about the bronze statues. But anyway, we're not going to read that. You get the idea. You will see a lot of Je me souviens, which is the motto of Quebec. It's also on their license plates. It means I remember. So in a lot of ways, the Quebecois are still fighting a battle, still fighting a war that ended 300 years ago in a lot of ways. With all that I remember stuff. I've heard people compare them in some ways to the American South. It's like they're still fighting a war that was over hundreds of years ago. Anyway, here's some more pictures of the Parliament building. It's gardened quite nicely on the outside. These next couple pictures are of the fortifications of Quebec. Again, seeing the walled city, and then they're of the Citadel as well. So I mentioned that the entire city, or the old city at least, is enclosed by walls. So here are some of the walls. Again, they're built to keep people out, and this is the Citadel, the entrance. Oh, I should go back. The entrance of the Citadel, you have to go underground to get into it. There are roads that lead in, but they are not for tourist use. So you go in underground, you come out, and you go in through the walls right here. Again, you go in through the underground. Here are, the traditional Canadian mounted police, Mountie guys or whatever. Now, right when I got there, I wanted to go here first because I knew that they did a changing of the guard right at 10 a.m. every day. I had read that, so I made sure I got here. And I got here right at 10, right when they were doing the changing of the guard. So this is a changing of the regiment that's stationed there. It's the 22nd Regiment, the Van Deuxième, I should say, 22nd Regiment. And here's all the people like me watching the demonstration. So they had soldiers marching about. These guys were the regiment that was group that was apparently on guard, and they were going to be swapped out with a new group. By the way, they had a marching band here as well, a regimental band wearing the same uniforms, and of course they marched in and marched out. So I took a couple pictures of this. As someone who was in a marching band for many years, I have a bit of an interest in that. They were pretty good, I'd say. They were pretty good. I mean, I've seen better, but they were pretty good. And I have, of course, a lot of friends from that period as well, so they enjoy seeing marching band stuff too. There's the band playing the groups on and off here in sort of this big city square. By the way, regiment has a regimental mascot. What's a good regiment without a mascot? They had a goat as their mascot, so the 22nd Regiment apparently uses a goat as their mascot. So here they are now processing away at the end of the ceremony. These guys were the ones that are now on duty, and here's the guys marching off at the end, being played off by the regimental band. And here's the goat, once again, coming off the particular parade ground. These helmets are very interesting. They're like low enough that people can just barely see in these outfits. I wonder what it'd be like to wear one of these. I guess, I mean, I'm assuming that you can see, but it does a good job of hiding people's eyes and hiding people's faces. And the uniforms do a good job of hiding that as well. For example, I'm pretty sure that these are the women in this particular group, but you can't even really tell based on how the uniforms are set up just by looking at the height, and the uniforms kind of obscure who these people even are, which is part of the idea. Okay, so military historian here. Have to sort of get this in. Why do they wear the big high helmets? The idea was back in the 17th or 18th century, when people were lined up on the battlefield, the high helmet makes you look taller and it makes you look more intimidating. That was the idea behind it. And that was the idea behind the big, like, flashy colors as well. The bright red that the British wear was designed to make them look more intimidating on the battlefield. Well, it was the idea behind it, that they look sort of real frightening. And obviously that doesn't make sense in the modern world, but those are more historic sort of dress parade uniforms there. Okay, so a couple more pictures of the Citadel. That was the marching field, sort of like the parade ground where they march right in the center. This is the regimental chapel. Now, it was not open to the public, which is a shame. I would have liked to have seen it. Note the Vimy 1917 there, so it's dedicated to one of the battles in World War I. Je me souviens, you'll see that a lot. Again, I remember, in flowers there on the hillside. And this is the entrance and exit for the Citadel. Here it is. You can see the name of the regiment stationed here, the French-Canadian Regiment, and it is, as I said, the 22e Regiment, the 22nd in Canada. They are called the Vendus in English, apparently. That's like the slang term, the Vendus, because we people who are English speaking cannot pronounce 22e for 22nd Regiment. Okay, the rest of these pictures are some more shots of the Citadel as I'm leaving on the way out. Picture of the walls. This is what it looks like from the top. That's the parade ground right there. That's the regimental chapel. And then people stay in the barracks. This is the entry and exit point. So just an overhead shot of what it looks like. And some more pictures of, that's the entryway right there with the guards, people coming and going. Another picture of that. So from here, I'm starting to leave the Citadel and I'm walking to the old part of the town. You get some great views looking down from the walls of the Citadel. This is looking down towards the old town. Great views of the old part of Quebec. This one I think came out particularly well. You can see both this building here, which is a hotel, and we're going to see more of that in a minute. And then this is like the port area here, down the cliffside. But it's a great view, and I had a beautiful day as well. I was fortunate to have good weather throughout this trip. That's a shot of the river. This is where the St. Lawrence starts to widen. Quebec is the last place where there's a bridge over the St. Lawrence. If you go further north from here, you have to take a ferry to cross the St. Lawrence. This is the last place where there are bridges across. And there are tour boats too. This is a tour boat, by the way, like a cruise tour boat. So people do take cruises up and down the St. Lawrence. And that's looking back up at the Citadel again, at the park. Here is a boardwalk. We're coming up to this building here. This is the Chateau Frontenac. I have to look at the sign again, but this is the most photographed building in Quebec. It is this very, very fancy hotel that was built, I think, either in the late 19th or early 20th century. This is a monument to Wolfe and Montcalm, one of many, the two generals who fought in the Battle of Quebec. Wolfe was the British commander, his name's on this side. Montcalm was the French commander, his name's on the other side, but you can only see one side in this picture. And there's just a nice view looking out over the river with these ceremonial cannons here. I'm sure they don't work anymore. Anyway, there's the chateau, the hotel. Again, it looks very impressive. There is construction being done. There's always construction being done. If you travel a lot, you'll always see construction. This is looking down at the port part. Again, there's a steep cliff here right below where this picture is taken. So remember, Quebec is not just a walled city, it's also up on a hill. And here's a statue of Samuel de Champlain, who I believe is the founder of Quebec. I believe he founded Quebec in 1608, if I remember this. Not all this stuff was here then, but well, something was here. Probably a little wooden fort or something, but was built by Champlain. And this is a different statue. But this is sort of like the city center of Quebec, right in front of the big hotel in this sort of open air little park. Very small little park, but this is like the city center. And this is where all the tourist buses are coming in and dropping people off. You'll see them in these pictures here. Look at it. Look at all these tourist buses coming in and dropping off all the people who come in and walk around for 30 minutes and then get back on the bus and drive away again. But yeah, anyway, this is where most of the people were. So this is where you saw the most people. Entryway to the hotel. Go into this gate. Looks like you're in Europe here. Oh, here we go. The Chateau Frontenac. That's it. It's the Fairmont Chateau Frontenac. I'm glad I got a picture because I've already forgotten what the name of this was. Another picture of what this hotel looks like. And there's the entrance after you go through the initial gate. And here's a picture of the interior. Very nice, very fancy, very expensive. Far outside my price range, let me put it that way. I'll be staying in another hostel here. I will not be staying in the chateau. I'm sure that this cost is, well, I didn't look it up, but it was a lot higher than what I was willing to pay. And then what follows are some pictures of the old city, Vieux Quebec, Old Quebec. As I mentioned, it's a walled city. It's actually pretty neat to get into the city. You actually have to walk through one of these gates. There's only about 4 of these ways in or out. So, you know, you're driving your car and you have to drive through the gate into the walled city. It's pretty cool. Although this city you really don't want to be driving in. You want to be walking on foot. So you want to park the car quickly. But anyway, that's just a look of what it looks like going in. And here's some pictures of walking around in the old town. Lots of like pedestrian only streets and lots of small shops, little cafes, little places to buy souvenirs. Neat place to go. I would highly recommend going here. The only problem is Quebec is really far north from the US. It's very hard to get here from the US because it's so far to the north. But if you can get there, it's a fabulous place to spend a day or two just walking around and soaking up the ambiance. It helps if you can speak French though. It helps if you, because everything is written in French. I mean, a lot of it's in English, but not everything. Here's just a picture of another one of the churches. Quebec does not have churches as impressive as Montreal, but this is an Anglican church, the Cathedral of the Sacred Trinity. Sante. Is it Sant or Sans? Trinity? Sant? Is it Santa? Anyway, it's something about Cathedral of the Holy Trinity. Okay, it is in English right there. By the way, note that because it's Anglican, they do English first and French second. Kind of amusing. This is fairly nondescript on the outside. I wouldn't say it's too spectacular. And then just some shots of the interior. I've mentioned this before in the last video, but note the big difference between an Anglican church and a Catholic church. Very different design. It's just very noticeable if you look at how they do the churches differently. And it speaks to the different approaches that different branches of Christianity have. Anyway, there's the altar. And yeah, I didn't take a lot of pictures because that one wasn't too fancy. This is just more of the shops, more of the walking scenes. Cool as a Moose boutique if you wanted to get something there. And there are street artists as well. This is reminiscent of Paris once again. There are a lot of street artists who are, you know, have their paintings and such on display. This guy was quite good. I would have loved to have bought one of these, but his starting price was like $200, and the real nice ones were like $500 or $600. So, thanks. I'll just take a picture. I'll take a picture and be happy with that. This is another one of the small little squares in the middle of town. I'm afraid I don't know who this is dedicated to, but it's obviously a priest of some kind because of the way he's dressed in that. Here's the Museum of French America. I did not go in here. I just took a picture. You did have to pay to go inside, so I just took a picture of what it looked like on the outside. And this is a picture of one of the Catholic churches in Quebec. So the name of this is, oh, it's the exact same thing again. It's the Basilique Cathédrale Notre-Dame de Québec. So it is once again the Basilica of Notre Dame. So exactly the same name as the one in Montreal. This is the biggest church in Quebec City. It is, once again, a Catholic church. So again, note the difference between a Catholic church and an Anglican church. Now, the wild thing about this one was they had all these video screens on the walls. Yeah, I haven't really seen this before. Maybe this is what we're going to see in the 21st century in churches, but all these like video screens on the walls right there. Here's one of the side altars. This is I'm not sure who this is. Can't really tell. It's a little too blurry to make out who that's supposed to be. But there's the main altar, and fortunately, this picture came out looking very crisp, very clear. I think I took this about 4 times until I could get it lined up correctly. But this one came out looking the way I wanted it to. And as I've mentioned, it's very pretty. Again, like other Catholic churches, there's a lot of gilt. It's very ornamental, very decorated. But there's a certain charm to it as well. You can see that a great deal of time and effort and money went into putting this together. And then this is looking back at the entrance once again. The pipe organs are usually right above the main entrance. That's standard. You cannot go up to the second floor to see what it looks like up there. So that's the best I could do. These next couple pictures, I believe, are more street scenes, again, in Old Quebec and Vieux Quebec. So again, just giving you an idea of what some of these look like. You can ride in a horse-drawn carriage if that's your thing. I like horses, but I didn't ride on the carriage. This is from Montmorency Park. Now, Montmorency Park is actually pretty small. There's not too much there. Montmorency Park is noteworthy. This is actually a picture from, well, this picture is where I'm standing in the park looking back at one of these government buildings. Montmorency is noteworthy because there was a building here where one of the meetings that led to Canadian Confederation took place. Now, that building is no longer there anymore, but that's why the site is noteworthy. Here is a picture looking down at the port part of Montreal. This is the other old part of the town outside the walled city, but this is actually the oldest part of Montreal, right by the river. And you can notice how some of these buildings are made, all the stonework, they're quite old, but you get great views looking down from atop the walls, looking down at the port city. So you can see the river, you can see the old buildings. It makes for some great views on a nice sunny day. There's the Chateau, well, the hotel, Frontenac or whatever it's called, in the background. Again, the city is very hilly. There are a lot of steps. So you do walk up and down hills a lot in Quebec, and this is walking down one of those hills towards the port part of the old town. So these are more of the port part, right by the river. Again, lots of historic buildings. Everything's very old. The oldest buildings here actually date back to the 17th century, back to the late 1600s, but most of them are from the 1700s, from the 18th century. And excuse me, this is the heavily touristed part of Quebec. Lots and lots of pedestrians. Again, note the brick and cobblestone streets. So most of these streets are closed off to cars, just for pedestrians. You can ride a little car up and down the cliffs if you want, the funicular, but I just walked down the steps because you have to pay money to ride that thing. Didn't really seem that worthwhile. If you want to eat, there are a million places to eat here. C'est bon la vie. Yep. Life is good. Lots of places to eat. This mural, somebody took this otherwise unremarkable building and painted this crazy design on the side of it. So it's like painted to look like a cross section of the interior back in, oh, how are they dressed? Looks like 18th century dress. Yeah, looks like from the 1700s based on how they're dressed, but painted this extravagant thing on the side of the building. Very worthy of a picture. And there's actually the little car people are riding up and down. And just more of the shops. Souvenir places, places to eat. Worth checking out if you come here. This is the original town square. This is the oldest part of Quebec. It's not really the center of the town now, but it was when it was originally founded. This is, what is it, Place Royale? Where is it? It's said here on that, yeah, Place Royale. I saw it on the last slide. So this is the original town square dating back to the 1600s. And this is where the oldest buildings in the town are located, and they've been preserved. So here it is, retracing Champlain, 400 years of history, Interpretation Center of Montreal, Place Royale in 1800, and they have a statue. The funny thing is they have a statue to Louis XIV here, who was not the king when Quebec was founded, but he was the king when Quebec was incorporated as a royal colony. So I guess that they still really like Louis XIV here, even though, you know, he's been dead since 1715. Yeah. Louis XIV is the longest serving king in European history. He was king from 1642 to 1715. So he was king for 72 years. From the age of, he became king when he was 5 years old, and he lived to be 77. A little bit of trivia. This is the oldest church in Quebec. This is Notre Dame des Victoires. So this is the oldest church. You can kind of tell it's right in the oldest part of the town. It's, well, I mean, you can see it's been through quite a bit, this building here. And it looks kind of its age. So Notre Dame des Victoires, constructed in 1688. It was named after the siege of Phipps. I don't know where Phipps is. And the disaster of Walker's flotilla. She is the oldest stone church in Quebec. So it was named after two victories. If it was built in 1688, then it was named after two victories in the 9 Years' War. 9 Years' War. So it was 1688. Then it was named after victories in the 9 Years' War, or known in America as King William's War. But yeah, it's the as it says, it's the oldest stone church in Quebec, and it dates back to just before 1700. So this is another very small church, not big, very intimate on the inside, not too much to see here, but it is very old and it's quite small. That's why I only have the two pictures. There's not much to see. It's just a little church, but in its own way, it has its own charm for being so old. Here's two people playing the bagpipes. You see random stuff sometimes when you're walking around. This is the Museum of Civilization. So this is a museum of Quebec's history. I did go in here, and there was some interesting stuff in here. So their main exhibit, their permanent exhibit, is Le Temps des Québécois. In other words, the history or the times of the Quebec people. So they had all different stuff here about the history of Quebec. I did learn a little bit while I was in here. This is a reconstruction of Champlain's fort when he originally founded the city in 1608. So what that would have looked like is they best think. Just a little, I guess, a little building surrounded by a wooden palisade. Wouldn't have been too much there, obviously. This is the Royal French Seal of Coat of Arms from the 18th century. This actually dates back to the 1700s, this particular one here. And of course, some stuff for Les Aubes, the Canadians. You can see some of the Canadian stuff that dates back to earlier in the 20th century. Here's a little reconstruction of the battle on the Plains of Abraham, September 13th, 1759, the battle between the French and the British. These are the French here, these are the British here. Here's the walled city, so again, it gives you a little bit of the geography once again. You can see the cliffs here, how Quebec is built on a high cliff. The walls around the city. Now note that this is where the Citadel is located today, but the Citadel wasn't built until the 1800s, so that was not there. I mentioned this in the previous video I did, but the French made a mistake. They came out of the city and fought. The French probably should have just stayed in the city. There was no reason why they had to leave the city to fight on the plains outside the city, but they did, and they lost. The British won the battle. They took over French North America, and, well, the British and their descendants have been in charge ever since. So the Quebecois are still a little bitter over all that in a lot of ways. Here's an example of what some of the uniforms looked like at the battle. You've got a British uniform on the left and a French uniform on the right. The British wore red and the French wore white in the 18th century. The French wore white because it was the color of the French monarchy, the House of Bourbon. Just a little trivia. I'm sure you were very, very curious about what the French wore when they went to battle back in the 18th century. But now you know, and now you won't forget it. The most interesting thing about this museum, though, was something I had no idea was in the museum at all. Ubisoft, which is a French software developer, they had actually sponsored a temporary exhibit, which was a history of video games, jeux vidéo, in French. So there was a whole exhibit on the history of video games. Let's see, Expedition adapted for the Museum of Civilization, and by an idea from mo5.com, whatever that is, with the collaboration of National Museum in Grand Palais, Paris. Interesting. But anyway, I had no idea this was there, but it was all about history of video games, tracing that. And they actually did a really good job. So this was, for me, I'm like, wow, this is awesome. It's sponsored by Ubisoft. So here is the main character from Assassin's Creed 3, all decked out. I'm afraid I don't know what the character's name is because I haven't played that game, but I do recognize it. So yes, it is sponsored by Ubisoft. So you will see some Ubisoft games here. But they did a really good job of tracing the history of video games. So what are these? Well, these are all Pong consoles. The first generation of video games was Pong consoles, machines that only played Pong. And that's what these all are. These are all from the 1970s, all done in the 1970s. Lots of different versions. These all play only one game. They all play Pong, and it was a way to play that at home. So that is the earliest form of a home video game console, Pong consoles. Then here were all systems from the second generation. What's the second generation? For those who don't know, Atari 2600, Intellivision, ColecoVision, stuff like that. So not only do they have them on display, but they're hooked up to TVs and you can play some of the games. Like here's Pitfall. You can play Pitfall right here. And people really enjoyed this. I mean, people were taking pictures, people were, playing the games. It was really neat. So like here is a copy of ColecoVision with Zaxxon, which is a game I'm not too terribly familiar with. But I am, of course, familiar with ColecoVision, but I'd never seen one in person. never actually seen the wild and crazy ColecoVision controller down here with the phone set up. Yes, including even a pound key. Yeah, so hashtag ColecoVision. Yes, so this is what the ColecoVision looks like. And again, I had never actually seen one in person. I'd only known about it from the internet. So yes, you could play these games. And then the next whole section was all NES games. Actually, they had a Sega Master System and some of the other stuff from the third generation. But here's a system hooked up to play Final Fantasy. So yeah, Final Fantasy. One of the games that's near and dear to my heart. Someone had started a game and they had screwed it up horribly, so I played for about 10 minutes and basically I fixed all their mistakes and set things up so someone wouldn't be horribly misequipped and things like that. And then there's other stuff here on RPGs from that era. So Prince of Persia, Ultima 4, Quest of the Avatar, Defender. Is it that Defender or Defense of the Crown? I can't remember. But famous RPG stuff from that era. So really cool stuff. Here is stuff from the fourth generation. This is an SNES, but it's not just an SNES. It's a European SNES. It's a PAL SNES, which is really cool. That's why I took the picture of this. Note the little logo here, and the buttons on the controller are not the same color they were for North American SNESs. So if you're from Europe, this will look very normal, but if you're from North America, this will look a bit odd. This is their fifth generation setup. All stuff from the fifth generation. So here is a Nintendo 64 playing Mario 64, and what else do they have? They had some other stuff. They had a version of Doom running over here, and yeah, they had a really nice version of Doom running over here that I was testing out. There were a couple of problems with the Doom system though. One of the problems was their Alt key didn't work, so you couldn't strafe. Yeah. Couldn't strafe. Number two, their down arrow key didn't work, so you couldn't run backwards. You couldn't strafe and you couldn't run backwards. I was like, oh my god. Trying to play Doom without the ability to walk backwards or strafe, it was like, oh. But anyway, it was still fun to, mess around with for a couple minutes. And the highlight of their sixth generation, their more recent stuff, was they had a DDR machine set up. And I was like, ooh, DDR machine. This is very nice. However, it wasn't any DDR machine. It was a fifth mix machine. Now, granted, if you haven't played DDR, that doesn't mean much to you. But I have never actually seen a fifth mix machine. That is a rarity in North America. You do not see many of them. Here's the setup. By the way, this is what I mean by a fifth mix machine. That is a Japanese DDR game. That is not intended to be used in North America. So there is no English text whatsoever in this setup. It's all in Japanese. So if you don't know what you're doing, it's hard even to get the game running. But fortunately, between being able to read a little bit of Japanese, what's in katakana and hiragana in any case, and having played DDR lots, it's not too hard. Besides, you can kind of figure it out, I guess. It's not too hard. But anyway, that's the setup there. I wanted to show that. I wanted to take a picture of my score too, but the score only stays on the screen for like 5 seconds, and I couldn't get a picture of what that looked like. So anyway, there is the DDR cabinet, and people were using it. People always enjoy DDR stuff. But fifth mix machine. Now the problem with fifth mix is there's no speed mods. For those who play DDR, no speed mods on fifth mix, and I am heavily dependent on speed mods to do anything in DDR. It's all 1x in fifth mix. So I had a pretty brutal time on some of those songs. But I did manage to get an A on Dream a Dream, which is a fifth mix song, one of my favorites. Rather easy, of course, but hey, it was 1x. Give me a break. It was 1x. And it would have been a double A under the modern scoring system. I wanted to take a picture of it, but couldn't do it. Anyway, and then there's other more modern stuff in here. This was sort of the last room and you're on the current day stuff. So they had stuff like Wii stuff and 360, and they had some like tablet games like Angry Birds set up. And of course they had a bunch of Ubisoft games as well, like they had Rayman and Assassin's Creed and so on. But overall, outstanding exhibit. Really, really neat. For someone who enjoys video games like me, and for someone who is pretty familiar with their history, I could have spent all day there. As it was, I spent 2 hours in this exhibit, but I could have spent 8 hours in this exhibit easy. Could have been spent all day there. Well, that done, it was time to go back and see what more there was to see of the city before the end of the day. I wanted to finish circling around the rest of the walled city. This is the seminary, in other words, where priests go to be educated and trained. This is also taken through a grate, by the way, through a closed-off grate, but there's a picture of it. And just some more pictures of the walled city as I go around. Pictures of the old town, just to get an idea of what it looks like. This is the Montcalm house. This is where Montcalm stayed, where he was living prior to the capitulation of Quebec. Let's see, this building has been around. Apparently, this building was constructed in 1727. It's been preserved. It looks quite good. I mean, it's not a fancy-looking building or anything, but this is where Montcalm stayed prior to the Battle of Quebec. Just get a picture of it. And then these are just some more pictures of the fortifications on the outside. Lots of people were walking around the fortifications. People get lunch here, eat out. See, these people have brought up like a picnic lunch and they're sitting out a blanket. The one other thing I should mention is it was very hot. That's why everyone's in the shade. It was very hot. It was up over 30 degrees in Quebec, which is about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was very hot. And everyone was talking about, all the people were talking about it. Like the locals were like, yeah, it's really hot here. Summer Festival of Quebec. So even though it's, you know, really cold in the winter, it actually can get quite hot in the summer as well. It was unseasonably warm even for them. Anyway, that's just another picture looking down from the fortifications at what the old town streets look like. And more pictures of the fortifications. Here's where they keep the horse carriages, apparently. This is kind of a looking over the wall at where all the horses are set up. And more of what it looks like up on top of the walls. Here's a horse. By the way, this is really cute. They have water fountains just for the horses to get a drink. I thought that was really sweet. It's like, oh, the fountain just for the horses to get a drink. And this horse was thirsty. He was getting a big drink as I took this picture. Okay, now the last thing I wanted to do is I'd set aside I wanted to use the late afternoon to walk around on the Plains of Abraham, where the actual battle was fought between the British and the French in 1759. And that's what this is showing. But there was a huge problem, and that is that Quebec was having a huge summer music festival while I was there, with all kinds of artists, like fairly big name people that like you would have heard of. I can't remember who was actually here, but they had this gigantic stage set up right in the middle of the battlefield. I was like, oh, I didn't want to see a big stage. I wanted to see the battlefield. So unfortunately, that made it kind of tough to see this, but it's hard to see, but there's the Citadel in the background behind the big stage, and there's a hill that slopes down. There's sort of a little depression here, and then the hill slopes back up again. And then right at the top of that incline, like right behind where this picture is taken, that's where the battle was actually fought. And it's normally a park. I mean, it is a park, but there was all these tents and sound booths and, porta potties set up, and it was not what I wanted to see. Anyway, here's a picture showing that there used to be actually a golf club set up on the Plains of Abraham. Not anymore. And here is finally, away from the sound stage and away from all the crowds, where the actual battlefield is located. So these trees weren't here at the time, but this is actually where they fought in 1759. So this is the actual Plains of Abraham battlefield. Like right here is where they lined up and fired at each other, and where the British ultimately prevailed. And then here's finally a look out over the river, a look out at the St. Lawrence. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. And that's it. For whatever reason, I ended up not taking a picture of the hostel where I stayed. I stayed in another hostel in Quebec. It wasn't as nice as the one in Montreal, but it wasn't bad. It was a little expensive, but the problem is everything in the old town in Quebec, in the Vieux-Quebec, is very expensive, very expensive. So there's not that many places to stay, and where there is to stay is very expensive. All right, so we're going to wrap up here. I know this has been going on a while. If you guys have been watching for a while, maybe you can watch this in 2 parts or watch it over a series of different times. But we're going to finish up by the last part, the last place I went in French Canada, in Quebec, and that is Saguenay. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. So let me show where that is. Saguenay is a national park in Quebec. It is up here. So here's Quebec City. You drive north, and you come up here and see Parc National de Saguenay. Here it is. So this is where it is. And it's basically a big river fjord that cuts through when the Saguenay River comes down and meets up with the St. Lawrence. So that's where these pictures are from, the national park in Saguenay. So that's what you'll be seeing. Now, to get up there, this day involves a lot of driving. So you got to leave Quebec. And the way that I took this road, 138, drove up here, get on this road, 381, drive up to here. And by the way, there's like nothing all through here. I mean, there's another park here, a national park. There was some neat scenery, but I didn't stop to take pictures. So drive up here to La Baie and then drive east over here. But it's a lot of driving anyway to get up to this area. So let me show you what some of those pictures look like. I did take a couple, pause, that's what I want. I did take a couple pictures, just a couple pictures here at the Chute Montmorency. That's the Montmorency Falls, which are right outside Quebec. It's about 5 miles outside Quebec, about 8 to 10K. This is what they look like in the winter. They actually don't look that spectacular in the summer, but in the winter, they like freeze over and they look absolutely spectacular. I've seen some photos of what they look like in the winter. It is magnificent. But here's what they look like in the summer. I was actually here before the place opened. I was here at about 7 a.m. because I always get these early starts. And the place was actually closed. So this is me taking a picture over the railing here. And I would have liked to have gone in when it was open because you can walk across this bridge here. But needless to say, was not open at the time. And I had to get a move on. Okay, here's a picture of the trail map from Saguenay Park. I was going to be in this area right here at L'Anse Saint-Jean, which is St. Jean Cove, is this area here. So that's where these pictures are taken. Oh wait, no, I wasn't here. I was up here. No, wait. Yes, I was here. I was here at Bay Eternity, at Eternity Bay, by Eternité. So I was here. Never mind. Forget what I just said. This is the area where I was. And there's a hiking trail. You park your car here. There's a hiking trail that goes up here. There's a statue, another Notre Dame statue on Cape Trinity. So that's the hike that I would be doing here. Then later on, I'd go over here to Tadoussac and check out Tadoussac. So anyway, we'll see that in a little bit. Okay, so anyway, here we are at Saguenay Park. And there's the trail to the statue. Not that far in terms of distance, only 3.5K. That's not really that far. So 7K round trip, that's a little bit less than 5 miles. But it says, in terms of elevation, it says difficult. Monte difficile. So it said difficult in terms of elevation. And yeah, it actually did have a lot of elevation changes. Here's what it looked like at Eternity Bay. Now this is at low tide. You can tell it's low tide because of the mud flats that are revealed. And yeah, it looks kind of ugly at low tide. At high tide, later on in the day, the water level rose and it was a lot prettier. But when you see that exposed mud, it's not that pretty. Okay, so this is another just map. Notre Dame Trail. This entire trail was called the Capitacan Trail. And the actual full trail is 215K. So yeah, I did not walk 215K. So the trail starts here, and it actually goes all the way up here to Lac Saint-Jean, which I did not see. But if you really are a trooper and you're really dedicated, you could do that. I guess you could probably do it in a little over a week, I guess. Here's another look at the lake, at the water. This is this humongous rock that looks like it's going to fall but isn't. So it's like a little natural theater where people can sit and rest if they wanted to. This was right at the start of the trail. So here's the trail going up. You went up a long way. It was a big elevation increase. I think it was 500 or 600 meters in terms of elevation gain. So once you start to go up, you start to get these gorgeous views of the Saguenay Fjord, like this, looking down. And then this is looking back at the entrance, looking back at where I initially came. There's a better picture view of that right here. I got a better picture, a few more turns of the trail up. So that's the visitor center is back there, and you can see the tide is already starting to rise and cover the mud flats. But I mean, it's a gorgeous view. Very, very pretty looking back there. Nice to see something other than just a city for a change. And there's looking again forward at the Saguenay Fjord, looking between the trees. Here's another view of the trail, and it says statue 800 meters. It was only 800 meters, which isn't far. That's only about a half mile. But again, serious elevation change. It was mostly going downhill, but then you had to come back uphill on the way back. This is going down on the trail. And another view of the fjord right there. You can see the steps. See how it's all these steps? I mean, going down, it's nothing. But then on the way back, you got to walk back up again. So, yeah. Anyway, there's a huge statue of Mary again at the end of this trail. Why somebody put it there is a good question. I believe the idea was to watch over sailors, as it says. The Madonna of Saguenay has been watching over sailors since 1881, and they had apparently all kinds of trouble getting the statue there, had to carry the pieces to this location. But here's the view from the statue itself, and it is absolutely gorgeous. The day is a little bit hazy, so I mean, it's not quite as clear, but it's still a tremendous view. There are tour boats who go up and down the fjord as well, and I believe that's one of the tour boats, but just so blue in terms of the water. And there's another view looking in the opposite direction. So the hike took about an hour to get there and then another hour to get back, which I guess is not too bad for the distances involved. And it's a lot of work going up and down the hills, but you do get a great view, so that makes it worthwhile at the end. And then that's just what it looks like, seeing the statue. Okay, so for these next couple pictures, there's not too many more. From here, I had, again, done the hiking here. This is where I was before, right here. See, Parc de Saguenay. That's Eternity Bay. So from there, get back on the road, drive down here, drive on 170, down here to Saint-Simeon. And from there, you drive up to Tadoussac. Now, Tadoussac is across the river, or across the fjord, so you have to get on a ferry boat. But the ferry is free. They don't charge you anything, and they actually leave every 20 minutes. So this was really nice. I didn't have to wait at all. I drove up, and there was a boat coming, got right on. And so that's what this picture is showing right here. So hop on the ferry, and these next couple pictures are on the ferry crossing over to the other side of Saguenay Fjord. Looking back there, that's the road that you drive up to. The road literally just goes right up to the water, and then it stops. And here we are coming back on the other side. So there's two ferry boats, and they just cross back and forth endlessly every 20 minutes in the summer. This one is the Félix Antoine Savard, heading back the other way. And then, so the rest of these pictures are from Tadoussac. Well, why come here to Tadoussac? Well, this is another historic town. It might say 1864 here, but that's just when the hotel was built. At Tadoussac itself actually dates back to the early 17th century. This is one of the first little trading posts that the French founded when they were in Quebec. So here's the hotel. Again, I did not stay here. I mean, the pictures might make it look like I stayed here, but I didn't. That's the entryway in the front, and here's the entry in the back. This is a fairly well-known hotel in this area. Quite fancy. There's the little cross with fleur-de-lis. Here is a very old church, extremely tiny, was not open, unfortunately, would have liked to have gone inside. So here's where it's telling you a little bit about the history. Longtime Indian trading center, Tadoussac was visited in 1535 and 1542, became a meeting place for Indian and European traders. There's a small trading post built here in 1600, so even older than Quebec City. And let's see, in 1603, the Algonquin assured Champlain that the French were welcome to settle the land. So this was a major fur trading post. That's why I wanted to go here. It's a very historic location. What is this? 1600, 1942. So this is like a reconstruction of what one of these buildings might have looked like. What that looked like. And then here's a view of the coast. And there were actually people out on the beach. Again, I mentioned it was quite hot when I was here in Quebec. There are actually people out on the beach. So here's the harbor. That's obviously the reason why the French set up shop here. It was a little sheltered harbor. And, you know, there are kids on the beach, people having a picnic lunch. So very, very peaceful, very nondescript. So that was it for Tadoussac. Now this picture is actually out of order. This is actually from a different day. I put it here because there's no better place to put it. But this is a place where I got dinner. This is actually over in Nova Scotia. But this is the Lick-a-Chick. Little chicken place. Their chicken was quite good, by the way. But it was such a great name, I had to throw it in somewhere. The Lick-a-Chick. Anyway, the rest of these pictures, let me show you where I went from there. So from Tadoussac, this is, you know, here's Tadoussac. From Tadoussac, get back on the road, cross back over on the ferry, drive down 138, get on, you know, stay on this road on the coast, drive back to Quebec, had to go all the way back to Quebec City, cross over on the bridge, cross over the St. Lawrence, then get on the Trans-Canadian Highway, drive back up, and come over here to Riviere du Loup. So even there at Tadoussac to Riviere du Loup is not far as the crow flies. I had to drive all the way down and then all the way back up. And that took about 5 hours. So that was a long drive. There are ferries that cross, but I couldn't make the time for any of them. These ferries only run like once a day each way, and just didn't line up. So where I actually stayed the day I was in Saguenay is here at Riviere du Loup, which is another one of these towns, a little bigger than most. And in the evening, I walked around and just got a couple pictures of Riviere du Loup. So here's the place where I stayed. This was a nice place where I stayed. This hostel, this is another hostel, very cheap. This one was dirt cheap because Riviere du Loup is not a big tourist destination. This was like $20 to stay here. It was in a house. I was in a room that had like 4 beds, but there was only one other person in there. This place was not crowded. They actually make like a full breakfast for everybody each day, but I wanted to get out and rolling before their big breakfast, which is at like 8:30. So great place to stay. It's just kind of in the middle of nowhere, unfortunately. Sorry if you live in Riviere du Loup, but it is kind of in the middle of nowhere. So here's the town. It's just a kind of a small town, very out of the way, not a touristy destination. Just took some pictures. walking around the town as the sun went down. I guess the one most interesting thing was there is a little waterfall in Riviere du Loup. So this is the waterfall. Parc des Chutes is Waterfall Park. And it's open June 1st, Fête du Travail. Oh, it's Labor Day. Okay. So from June 1st to Labor Day, it's open 9 a.m. to, what is it, 21? That's 9 p.m. And then from Labor Day to Action de Grace, I don't know what that is. That's another day. It's only open on weekends from 9 to 7. Fin de semaine is weekends. Okay, but anyway, here you go. Here's a picture of the waterfall. And apparently they tapped this for hydroelectric power as well. I mean, nothing spectacular, but hey, you might as well see it. Here's the sun going down, and there's a little bridge over the river. And then finally, that's a view looking back at the waterfall. There's a little power generating station next to it, but you know, not much. So not much in Riviere du Loup, but pretty. I kind of like this picture too, just as the sun's going down and there's sort of the lights just coming on. I've gotten some of my best pictures right at that period where the sun's going down, sort of the Twilight era. Although the Twilight book series has kind of ruined that term for us. Anyway, so there you go. Those are my pictures as I traveled through the French portion of Canada, through Quebec. From here, it's on to Newfoundland and Labrador, and I'll try to do those pictures together in another video, since this one's gone on for quite some time. Anyway, once again, hope you enjoyed this. Oh, I should show you one last thing before I turn this off. Let's look at the webcam. Turn this over to the webcam person. So if you want to see what I picked up in Quebec, I like to get a little souvenir from places I've been to. So this is my Quebec souvenir, the little Quebec nutcracker guy here. He's got the Quebec flag. So this was not the cheapest thing I've ever bought. This is a little pricey, but it's a neat little souvenir, and I've got it on my dresser with all my other little knickknacks from different places. Anyway, once again, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'm trying to space these videos out so people have time to watch them. I'll finish this up probably with part 3 a little bit later, maybe next week. Until then, have a great week. See you guys later. Take care.